3 years ago, my wife's cousin Linda, who teaches high school biology in rural Ohio, gave me a small envelope of seeds at a family barbecue and told me to plant them along the back fence where nothing else was growing. The soil there is terrible, hard clay mixed with construction gravel from when the house was built. I had tried tomatoes in that spot twice and they barely survived. Nothing I planted there ever thrived. I scattered the seeds along about 15 feet of fence line in late May, raked a thin layer of dirt over them, and forgot about them. I did not water them. I did not fertilize them. I did not even think about them for 6 weeks. In mid-July, I walked out to the back fence and stopped. There were 12 plants growing along the fence that were taller than I am. 6, 7, almost 8 feet tall. Thick, green stalks with broad leaves and enormous seed heads at the top that looked like dark red torches. They had grown in the worst soil in my yard, with zero care, zero water beyond whatever rain fell, and zero attention from me. Linda told me to harvest the grain heads when they started to dry and turn brown in early September. I cut the heads off 8 plants and rubbed them between my hands over a bucket. Seeds poured out. Thousands and thousands of tiny round seeds, each one smaller than a peppercorn. From 8 plants, I collected almost 6 pounds of grain. Linda told me each of those seeds has more protein than wheat, more calcium than milk per calorie, and a complete amino acid profile that most grains cannot match. That was 3 years ago. I have never replanted amaranth. The plants that I did not harvest dropped their seeds naturally, and the following spring, dozens of new plants came up on their own in the same spot, and in new spots, along the driveway, between the patio pavers, next to the garage. Amaranth reseeds itself so aggressively that my biggest problem now is thinning it out, not growing it. 3 years of grain and greens from a single envelope of seeds that cost Linda about $1. I have not bought spinach or salad greens from the grocery store between June and October since the first summer. The grain goes into everything from porridge to bread to soup. But here is what should make you angry. This plant was the primary food source of one of the largest empires in human history. The Aztecs cultivated it as a sacred grain alongside corn and beans. It fed millions of people across Central America for centuries. And then it was systematically erased. First by Spanish conquerors who banned it to destroy Aztec culture, and then, 400 years later, by an American agricultural system that had no room for a crop that did not need pesticides, did not need fertilizer, did not need irrigation, and did not need to be repurchased every season. In the next 27 minutes, you are going to learn 3 things. First, the exact planting process, the growing timeline, and the harvest method for both grain and greens. Second, the nutritional profile that makes amaranth more complete than any single crop in your garden right now. And third, the full story of how this plant was banned, forgotten, and buried by 2 different empires 500 years apart, and why the seed companies that sell you tomato starts every spring have never once mentioned the most productive plant you could possibly grow. Stay until the end, because there are 5 mistakes that will reduce your harvest dramatically. And the 4th one is the difference between growing food and growing an ornamental plant that looks pretty but produces almost nothing edible. It is a Saturday morning in March. You are sitting at your kitchen table looking at seed catalogs, planning your garden for the season. Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, lettuce, herbs, the same crops you plant every year. You add up the seed packets and starts. $40, maybe $60 if you add the soil amendments and fertilizer. You know from experience that your garden will produce maybe $200 worth of vegetables over the summer if everything goes well. If the deer stay out, if the tomatoes do not get blight, if the squash bugs do not destroy the zucchini, that is a decent return on your investment. But here is what those seed catalogs are not telling you. There is a single crop that produces more nutrition per square foot than anything else in that catalog, in worse soil, with less water, with 0 pest problems, and it only needs to be planted once. After the first year, it comes back on its own, forever. The seed companies that print those catalogs have no incentive to tell you about it. A customer who plants amaranth once and never needs to buy seed again is a customer lost. A customer who buys tomato starts every April is a customer for life. Meanwhile, at the grocery store, the situation is worse. A pound of amaranth grain at a health food store costs between $6 and $12. A pound of fresh amaranth greens, when you can find them, costs more than spinach. You are paying premium prices for a plant that grows like a weed in the worst soil in your yard and produces more food per plant than almost anything else you could grow. The average American household spends over $500 a month on groceries. A significant portion of that goes to grains, greens, and protein sources. A backyard amaranth patch, once established, can provide a meaningful portion of your family's grain and green vegetable needs for zero cost per year after the initial $1 seed investment. And this is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Amaranth was not always a forgotten crop. For over 5,000 years, it was one of the most important food plants on Earth. The Aztec Empire cultivated amaranth alongside corn and beans as a dietary trinity. It was so central to Aztec culture that it was used in religious ceremonies. Amaranth grain was mixed with honey and shaped into figures of gods during festivals. Tribute payments to the Aztec emperor included thousands of tons of amaranth grain annually, almost as much as corn. When Hernán Cortés conquered the Aztec Empire in 1521, the Spanish recognized that amaranth was not just a crop. It was a pillar of the civilization they were trying to destroy. Cortés banned the cultivation of amaranth throughout the conquered territories. Fields were burned, seeds were confiscated. Growing amaranth became punishable by having your hands cut off. The ban was not about agriculture. It was about cultural annihilation. Destroy the sacred grain and you destroy a piece of the civilization's identity. Amaranth survived because it is, fundamentally, a weed. It cannot be eradicated. Wild varieties continue to grow across the Americas, in ditches, along roadsides, in abandoned fields. Indigenous communities quietly continued to cultivate it in small, hidden plots. The plant persisted, but it lost its status. It went from a sacred staple feeding millions to a forgotten weed growing on the margins. Hold on, because what happened next changes everything. In the late 1940s, the United States restructured its agricultural subsidy system in the aftermath of World War II. The Agricultural Act of 1948 formalized the federal price support system around a small number of commodity crops: corn, wheat, soy, cotton, rice. These crops received guaranteed prices, subsidized insurance, research funding, and market protection. Farmers who grew these crops were financially supported by the federal government. Farmers who grew anything else were on their own. This was not a conspiracy against amaranth specifically. It was a system designed to maximize production of crops that could be processed, stored, shipped, and sold by large corporations. Corn could become corn syrup, animal feed, ethanol, and 1,000 processed food ingredients. Wheat became flour for the baking industry. Soy became oil and animal feed. Every subsidized crop had an industrial processing chain attached to it that generated corporate revenue at every step. Amaranth fit none of these models. It could not be easily processed into industrial food ingredients at scale. It reseeded itself, so farmers did not need to buy new seed every year. It grew without pesticides, so chemical companies could not sell inputs. It grew without fertilizer in poor soil, so the fertilizer industry had no customer. It was, from a corporate perspective, the worst possible crop. A plant that feeds families for free and asks for nothing in return. So amaranth was simply excluded. Not banned this time, just ignored. No research funding, no extension service support, no seed company development, no entry in the mainstream agricultural catalog. By 1960, even farmers who remembered their grandparents growing amaranth had no access to improved varieties, no processing infrastructure, and no market for the grain. The plant was alive in every roadside ditch in America, but it was invisible in the agricultural economy. That erasure lasted for decades. It is only in the last 20 years that amaranth has begun to reappear in health food stores and specialty catalogs, usually at premium prices that make it seem exotic and expensive. It is neither. It is a weed that grows anywhere, produces more protein per square foot than wheat, and costs $1 to plant once. So let me show you exactly how to grow it, so the grocery store loses a customer and your backyard gains a food source that never stops producing. Step 1. Get the seeds. Buy a packet of edible grain amaranth seeds from any garden supply store or online seed supplier. Make sure the variety is labeled for grain production, not ornamental. Common grain varieties include Plainsman, Golden Giant, and Burgundy. A $1 packet contains hundreds of seeds, which is far more than you need. You will use maybe 50 seeds for your first planting and have enough left over to share with every neighbor on your street. Step 2. Plant after the last frost when the soil temperature is above 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Amaranth is a warm season crop that does not tolerate frost. In most of the United States, that means late May or early June. Scatter the seeds thinly on the soil surface and press them lightly into the ground, or cover with no more than 1/4 inch of fine soil. Amaranth seeds need light to germinate, so do not bury them deep. Water lightly once after planting. That is probably the last time you will need to water them unless you are in a severe drought. Step 3. Thin the seedlings when they reach about 4 inches tall. For grain production, space plants about 18 inches apart. The thinned seedlings are edible. Use them as microgreens in salads. As the plants grow, you can continue harvesting lower leaves for cooking, just like you would harvest spinach or chard. The leaves are nutritious at every growth stage. Now let me ask you something. How many trips to the grocery store have you made this year? How much have you spent on greens, grains, and protein sources? What if I told you that a single row of plants along your back fence, in the worst soil in your yard, could provide a meaningful portion of those items from June through October every year, forever, without spending another dollar after the first planting? That is not a hypothetical. That is what amaranth does. And that is why nobody with a product to sell has ever told you about it. Step 4. Let the plants grow. Amaranth requires almost zero maintenance during the growing season. No staking, no pruning, no pest control. Most garden pests ignore amaranth because of its naturally occurring oxalic acid and other compounds. Deer generally leave it alone. Rabbits ignore it. Japanese beetles prefer your roses. The plants grow to 6 to 8 feet tall in a single season and develop large seed heads at the top that start green and gradually turn dark red, purple, or golden depending on the variety. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. This channel has shown you how to fix your home, protect your garden, and cut your utility bills using things the industry buried. This one might be the most important yet because it is about the food on your table. Now let me show you the harvest. Step 5. Harvest the grain in early to mid-September when the seed heads begin to dry and turn brown. Bend the seed head over a bucket and rub it between your hands or shake it vigorously. The seeds fall out easily when they are ready. If seeds do not fall freely, the heads need another week of drying. You can also cut the entire seed head and hang it upside down in a dry area for a week, then shake the seeds out onto a clean sheet. From a row of 10 to 12 plants, expect to harvest between 6 and 12 pounds of grain per season. That grain has 13 to 14% protein, higher than wheat at 10%, rice at 7%, and corn at 9%. It contains lysine, an essential amino acid that is deficient in most cereal grains, making amaranth one of the few plant sources of complete protein. It also contains significant iron, magnesium, phosphorus, and manganese. Step 6. Save some seed heads for natural reseeding. Leave 3 or 4 plants standing after the main harvest. Their seed heads will dry completely on the stalk and drop seeds naturally in the fall. Those seeds will overwinter in the soil and germinate on their own the following spring. You will never need to replant. By the second year, you will likely have more amaranth coming up than you want, and you will be thinning volunteers instead of planting new seeds. That is the definition of a food source that feeds you forever for free. Linda, the biology teacher who gave me my first seeds, has been growing amaranth in her backyard for 7 years. She started with a single packet of Plainsman variety seeds along her garden fence. By the 3rd year, amaranth had spread to fill an area about 10 feet by 30 feet without any effort on her part. She harvests between 30 and 40 pounds of grain per season from that patch and uses the leaves as her primary cooking green from June through frost. She told me she has not bought spinach, kale, or chard from the grocery store in 5 years. She estimates the annual grocery savings from the grain and greens combined at between $300 and $400 per year, from a $1 packet of seeds she bought once in 2019. A retired couple I met at a seed swap last spring, named Hank and Doris, grow amaranth in their front yard in a suburb of Tucson. They planted it because nothing else would survive in their sandy, alkaline soil without constant watering. The amaranth not only survived, it thrived. In the Arizona heat with almost no supplemental water. They harvest the grain, grind it into flour with a hand mill, and use it for flatbread, porridge, and as a protein supplement in smoothies. Doris told me the flour makes the best pancakes she has ever had, nutty and slightly sweet, and that her grandchildren ask for amaranth pancakes every time they visit. Now, before you plant, you need to know what will reduce your harvest or ruin the effort entirely. Mistake number 1, planting too early in cold soil. Amaranth is tropical in origin, and the seeds will not germinate in soil below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. If you plant in April in the northern states, the seeds will sit in cold, wet soil, rot, and never come up. Wait until late May or early June. Be patient. The plants grow so fast once established that a late start barely affects the harvest. I have planted as late as mid-June and still harvested grain in September. Mistake number 2. Overcrowding the plants. Amaranth planted too closely together produces thin stalks, small seed heads, and reduced grain yield. For grain production, 18 inches between plants is the minimum. 24 inches is better. It feels wasteful when the seedlings are tiny, but by August, each plant will be a 6-foot-tall column of leaves and grain that fills its space completely. Mistake number 3. Harvesting grain too early or too late. Too early and the seeds are immature, small, and mostly hollow. Too late and the seed heads shatter, dropping seeds on the ground before you can collect them. The window is about 2 to 3 weeks in early to mid-September, when the heads have turned brown and dry but are still holding their seeds. Bend the head and tap it. If seeds fall freely into your hand, it is time to harvest. If nothing comes out, wait another week. If seeds are already falling on their own without touching the head, you are late and should harvest immediately. Have you ever noticed that seed catalogs devote entire pages to tomato varieties, pepper varieties, squash varieties, but never mention amaranth? It is not because amaranth is rare or difficult. It is because a customer who plants amaranth once never buys that seed again. The plant reseeds itself, and the seed you harvest from your own plants is genetically identical to what you would buy in a packet. There is no hybrid advantage to protect. There is no treated seed to sell. There is no annual purchase to generate. Amaranth is the opposite of a commercial seed product. It is a one-time gift that keeps giving without asking permission or payment. Mistake number 4. Growing ornamental amaranth varieties and expecting grain production. Garden centers sell ornamental amaranth varieties like Love Lies Bleeding and Hopi Red Dye that produce beautiful drooping seed heads but relatively little edible grain. These varieties were bred for visual appeal, not food production. If your goal is to feed your family, make sure you buy grain varieties, specifically Plainsman, Golden Giant, Burgundy, or any variety described as a grain or seed-producing type. The ornamental types are beautiful, but they will not fill your pantry. And mistake number 5, continuing to buy all your grains and greens at the grocery store when you have a plant in your backyard that provides both for free. This is the strategic trap. You plant amaranth, you harvest it once, you think that was interesting, and then you go back to buying flour, spinach, and protein supplements at the store because that is the habit. Meanwhile, the amaranth comes back on its own the next spring, grows to 8 feet tall, produces another 10 pounds of grain and another season of greens, and you ignore it because you forgot it was there. The grocery industry counts on your habits being stronger than your common sense. Amaranth is not a novelty garden project. It is a food system. Treat it like one and it will feed you for the rest of your life. For free. From $1. So let me put this in real numbers. The average American household spends over $700 per year on grains, cereals, and leafy greens combined. A backyard amaranth patch producing 30 to 40 pounds of grain and a full season of greens can offset between $200 and $400 of that annually. Over 10 years, that is $2,000 to $4,000 in grocery savings from a $1 investment that reseeds itself every year. But the real value is not in the savings. It is in the independence. Every pound of amaranth you harvest is a pound of food that did not come through a supply chain. A pound that was not sprayed with pesticides, not shipped from 1,000 miles away, not priced by a corporation, and not dependent on a store being open. In a world where grocery prices have increased over 30% in the last 5 years and show no signs of stopping, a self-reseeding protein-rich grain growing in your backyard is not a hobby. It is a hedge against a system that is failing you a little more every year. Now you know about the $1 seed that feeds a family forever. No replanting, no fertilizer, no pesticides, no irrigation, no annual seed purchases. Just a plant that grows like a weed, produces more protein than wheat, gives you greens all summer, and comes back on its own every spring because that is what it has been doing for 5,000 years. The Aztecs built an empire on it. The Spanish burned it. American agriculture ignored it. And a $1 packet at your local garden store can put it back in your life permanently. Next week, I am going to show you a $2 compound that preserves any food for months without refrigeration. The same method that kept armies fed for centuries before the canning industry decided you needed their products. Hit subscribe so you do not miss it. And the video on screen right now shows another food and garden secret the industry has been burying. Click it.